3 years ago, I dropped a grocery store avocado pit into a pot on my deck, and last winter, that tree set its first fruit. No $45 nursery tag, no grafted rootstock I paid someone else to grow. One seed I would have thrown in the compost. Now, here is what the grafting trade would rather you not connect. They have spent decades telling home gardeners that a seed grown avocado either won't fruit or takes 15 years to bother. I tested that claim in my own containers, kept the records, and what I found was different. Stay with me to the end, because there is one cut I make on a 2-year-old seedling that pulls the first harvest years closer, mate, and almost nobody outside the trade does it. Let me name who I am talking about, because vague villains are how people lose the thread. The authority here is the grafted nursery trade, the commercial growers who sell you a young tree already producing a known variety. Their whole model rests on a piece of law most gardeners have never heard of, the Plant Patent Act of 1930. That act let a nursery patent a plant, but only a plant propagated asexually. A graft, a cutting, a clone. It explicitly excluded seed-grown plants from protection. Read that twice. A grafted tree can be owned, a seedling cannot. 5 years later, in 1935, the avocado you almost certainly bought at the store got caught up in exactly this. Rudolf Haas patented the Haas avocado, plant patent number 139. Every Haas tree in commercial production since is a graft taken off that one original. The fruit you eat is patented genetics, the pit in your hand is not. Now here are the stakes in plain numbers. That same Haas at a nursery carries a tag around $45, plus the quiet implication that you could not possibly grow one yourself. The pit you scrape out tonight is free. For decades, home gardeners have dropped that free tree into the compost because they were told it would never fruit. I am not accusing anyone of a plot. I am a science teacher. What I'm doing is connecting an incentive to a piece of advice, and that piece of advice does not survive contact with my notebook. So let me start with the simplest thing, the thing the trade would rather you not connect for yourself. A grocery store pit grows into a tree that fruits. Not a houseplant, not a novelty, a tree that sets avocados. 3 years ago, I scraped the pit out of a Haas from the produce aisle, the kind of pit I would have tossed in the active compost bin without a second thought. I dropped it into a pot on my deck here in Black Mountain. Last winter, that tree set its first fruit. Free, not $45. Free. Now I want to be honest with you, because that is how I work. A seed-grown avocado is not true to type. What that means is the seedling does not come out identical to its parent the way a graft does. The fruit can be a little different in size, in skin, in oil content. But different is not worthless. When my first fruit ripened, I cut it open and ran it across my Brix refractometer. That is the tool that reads sugar content, higher being richer. The number came back solid, good eating. A real avocado off a tree that cost me nothing. I marked the date in my field notebook the same day, the way I have marked every planting on this plot for 22 years. That is the whole foundation, and it is exactly the part the nursery catalogue leaves out. They will tell you a seedling is a gamble. They will not tell you the gamble still ends with fruit on your counter. All right, let us keep going, because the obvious objection is the 15 years. You have heard it. A seedling avocado takes 15 years to fruit if it ever does. I tested that claim, and here is the science. The juvenile period is real. A seedling does carry a longer juvenile phase than a graft. That part is true, and I will not pretend otherwise. But the 15-year figure assumes one very specific tree. A seedling planted in open ground in ideal soil, left alone to grow into a giant. A ground-planted avocado spends those years building an enormous frame before it ever thinks about flowering. 15 years is how long that giant takes to mature. It is not a law of the seed. It is a description of one neglected scenario. Change the scenario and you change the timeline. I started by testing how to sprout them. Most people know the toothpick method. Suspend the pit over a glass of water and wait. I ran that against simply pressing the pit halfway into moist potting mix. Same kitchen window, same week. What I found was the pit set directly in moist soil sprouted faster and rooted stronger than the one dangling in water. The water method is the photogenic one, the soil method is the one that works. And then there is temperature. Avocado roots want warmth to get moving. I keep my digital soil thermometer in the pot and I aim for a root zone right around 70 degrees. Cold roots cannot absorb the phosphorus the tree needs to mature, so a chilly pot just stretches the wait. Warm that root zone to 70 and you shorten it. That is the kind of detail that does not make it into the advice that tells you to give up before you start. Here is what the container actually does for you. I start the seedling in a 1 gallon pot. As the roots fill it, I up pot, but only to about a 7 gallon, and then I stop. I keep that tree deliberately root restricted. I am not chasing a 15-foot specimen, I'm keeping it small on purpose. There is a hard reason for the pot beyond the timeline. I garden in zones 7 and 8, and avocado will not survive my winters in the ground. Most of these trees take cold injury, somewhere around 28 to 30 degrees, and we drop below that here several times a year, so the pot is not a compromise. It is the only way this works at my elevation. When the cold comes, I move the pot into my unheated polytunnel, which buys me enough protection to carry the tree through to spring. So tally it up. The nursery sells you a $45 grafted tree that, where I live, will die in the yard the first hard night. I grew mine from a free pit, kept it in a pot I already owned, and walked it inside for winter. 3 years from kitchen scrap to first fruit. Not 15. 3. And I track all of it. Plant height, the date the first flower opened, of course, the weight of that first fruit. In the Ziploc bag notebook on my garage shelf, next to 21 earlier ones. The records do not lie. And the reason you rarely hear that number is that nobody in the trade profits from you keeping a free tree alive on your own deck. Now, here is the part that surprised me, because it runs against instinct. You would think squeezing a tree into a small pot would stunt it. Fewer roots, less growth, less fruit. The opposite happens with maturity. Root restriction does not delay flowering. It accelerates it. Here is why. A tree that cannot sprawl its roots forever cannot keep pouring everything into vegetative growth. The restriction shifts the plant out of grow bigger mode and into reproduce mode sooner. Stress, applied deliberately, tells the tree its window is short, so it starts making fruit instead of more wood. I have watched the same thing across the test bed for years. A plant that senses a limit stops investing in foliage and starts investing in seed. Pot binding is not the enemy of an avocado seedling. On the timeline that matters to you, it is the ally. I have seen this exact principle on another container tree in my yard. My potted Meyer lemon sat there giving me 4, maybe 5 lemons a year. When I stopped treating it like a ground tree and started managing the container on its own terms, the root zone, the feeding, the restriction, it jumped to over 30 lemons the next season. Same tree, different rules. Container fruit does not play by ground rules, and most of the standard advice never makes that distinction. One more lever. If you can get a pit from a hardier Mexican race avocado rather than a pure Hass, the tree takes cold better and tends to mature a touch faster. Seed selection still matters, so you have the pot, the warmth, the restriction. There is one more door, the single cut I make on a 2-year-old seedling. Hold that thought. Now, before we keep going, I want to share something with you. If what I am walking you through here is making sense, and you're starting to see how much of fruiting is a measurement problem rather than a luck problem, then I want to point you to the full system. Everything I just showed you. Redirecting a tree's energy out of leaves and into fruit, that is the heart of Chapter 4 of my book, Steve's 30-Day Maximum Yield Protocol. Chapter 4 is Strategic Pruning, and it lays out the energy budget idea with diagrams, the finite energy a plant has, and how you decide where it goes. It is $17 at stevesgardenbooks.com. If you're watching on your television, grab your phone and point it at the QR code on the screen. Take your time finding it. I will be right here. If you're on a phone or laptop, the link is in the description. This is for the gardener who is already growing and just wants more from what is already in the ground. All right, now let me come back to the why, because this is what makes the whole thing make sense. Follow the money through the Plant Patent Act. A grafted, patented tree is a repeatable sale. The nursery propagates clones off the patented original, sells them, and where royalties apply, the patent holder earns on everyone. A free pit earns nobody anything. There is no royalty on a seed. There is no repeat sale on a tree you grew yourself for nothing. So the entire commercial structure has a quiet, built-in reason to point you toward the $45 tree and away from the thing in your compost bin. Multiply one composted pit by decades of home gardeners, and that is an enormous number of free trees that became nothing. Now let me do the honest thing and grant the other side, because the trade is not lying about everything. Grafted trees genuinely fruit faster than seedlings, and they come true to type. You know exactly the avocado you're getting. Those are real benefits. If you want a guaranteed Hass on a guaranteed timeline, a grafted tree delivers it. I will not pretend otherwise, but here is where a legitimate point got inflated into something false. A real advantage, grafts fruit sooner, got stretched into seedlings will not fruit, or seedlings take 15 years. That overstatement is the part my notebook contradicts. 3 years, not 15. Fruit, not failure. And the cost of that overstatement landed on you. If you have eaten avocados for years, you have almost certainly thrown away dozens of free trees. You composted the very thing you then paid $45 to buy back. So here is that cut I promised you. On a 2-year-old seedling, in the middle of summer, I take a clean knife and score a single shallow ring all the way around the main stem, just through the bark, not into the wood beneath it. One thin ring, once. That is it. Here is the science. The bark carries the phloem, the tissue that moves sugars down from the leaves. Score it, and you interrupt that downward flow. The photosynthate, the sugar the leaves made, backs up above the cut. That raises the carbon to nitrogen ratio in the upper canopy, and a high carbon to nitrogen ratio is the signal that flips a tree from making leaves to making flowers. I ran it in my test bed and logged it. The girdled seedling flowered the following spring. That single cut pulled the first harvest roughly 2 years forward. Now the caution, and take this seriously, a thin, shallow ring only. Done once. Never deep into the cambium, or you girdle the tree for real and kill the stem. This is standard practice in the commercial orchard trade, and it is almost never handed to the home grower. All right, before I let you go. Getting a seedling avocado to flower is one thing. Getting those flowers to actually set fruit instead of dropping is the next bottleneck. And on a container tree like the one on my deck, that comes down to pollination. That is chapter 6 of the book, Pollination Optimization. It covers why flowers drop without setting and how to hand pollinate to rescue fruit set, with a diagram showing exactly how. The whole book is 115 pages built on 22 years of my own recorded data. $17 at stevesgardenbooks.com. If you're on the big screen, go ahead and grab your phone and scan the QR code now. No rush. I will give you a second to pull it up. On a phone or laptop, the link is in the description. Now you have the part the trade left out. The full system is laid out step by step. So that is the whole thing. A free grocery store pit, root restricted in a pot, girdled at 2 years old, fruiting in years instead of decades. The nursery's 15-year line does not survive your own notebook. Next time, I will show you which other grocery store produce you can regrow on a windowsill for nothing. All right, that's what I have for you today. I'll see you in the next one.